Good afternoon and good evening for our attendee based in Asia, and good morning for the one based in America. Thank you for connecting with us today. I am delighted to open this new Episkin Academy webinar dedicated to the medical devices and its recent and major move to the alternative methods, a real game-changing event for the medical device industry in the regulatory testing strategy. Today, for this webinar, I will team up with Christian Pelvoisin, Scientific Director at the Episkin Academy, Anne-Sophie Rigaudot, Production Manager at Episkin, and Christelle Vidot, who will take care of the live session, which is a scientific expert and customer experience at Episkin. Christian, I leave you the hand now.
Thank you, Alain. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being so numerous. For some of you, I know that the time difference makes it is very early or very late, so thanks particularly to you. We will first respect our timing and share as much information as possible in this seminar. I'm very happy to open with Alain this Episkin Academy webinar on a major contribution of 3D models which change the way to perform biocompatibility for irritation of medical devices. The activity of Episkin Academy has also been impacted by the COVID situation in the world, and we had to adapt to continue to share and to train, which are our mission. The direct results of these virtual events, with the first one organized by Episkin Academy Shanghai in 2020. They conducted already 2 webinars on OECD methods for skin and eye irritation, and today we perform the first of 2021, organized from Lyon in France for irritation of medical devices. For Episkin Academy, these new online tools do not replace, but will complement our historical approach, which is based on courses, laboratory, training, demonstration, and 3-day certification for scientists, for students. We are convinced that more than ever, education and training are important drivers for the diffusion and acceptance of non-animal methods in toxicology. This is particularly the case today, and the timing is perfect, with a publication just 2 weeks ago of this new ISO standard. This standard will dramatically change the way this endpoint is evaluated for medical devices, and we are delighted to see that the commitment and investment of Episkin, and also from many other experts, companies, and academics over these last years, have now made possible to replace an animal test use for more than 70 years. In today's session, Alain Alonso, Marketing Director, will introduce Episkin and what is its DNA for more than 25 years. Then Anne-Sophie Rigaudot, Episkin Production Director, will take you inside the production rooms to show how our human skin models are reconstructed in 3D. I will then introduce the ISO 10993-23 standard and what it will change in the biocompatibility of medical devices. Then, finally, back to the laboratory with Christelle Vidot, in charge of customer support, for a live session of all the steps of the protocol. Just a practical recommendation, as we are very numerous today, for practical reasons, we invite you to ask all your questions directly on the chat. We will answer to it on the fly in the chat room, and also during the question and answer session at the end of the seminar. That's all for me, so now enjoy, and don't hesitate to ask your question. Alain, it's up to you.
Thank you, Christian. Allow me to very briefly introduce Episkin. Episkin is the world leader in tissue engineering for in vitro testing, operating since 1992, almost 3 decades. Actually, in 2022, it will be 30 years. More importantly, Episkin is only and 100% focused on producing and supplying 3D models. No cell, no media, no spare parts provided, nor testing service proposed. Just 3D models. On the slide, you can see that the models are divided in two big sections. The one from the skin models, which is on the red square over there, in which you have epidermal tissue and full thickness models. Among the epidermal tissue, you got two tissues, episkin and skintic RHE, which have already been validated at the OECD level for the skin corrosion and skin irritation of chemicals. And now we are very pleased to welcome the ISO logo, since we are now with the skintic RHE validated for the irritation of medical devices. For the mucosal model that you can see listed on the slide, allow me to have a special highlight on the human corneal epithelium, which is also involved in a TG for the OECD for the high irritancy of chemical. The application for these models are numerous and versatile. You can go for regular toxicology, as we've been able to see for the OECD and now for the ISO, advanced research, efficacy, drug delivery, pharmacokinetics, and all the possible endpoints that you can see listed on the right side of the slide. And these applications are also used massively in the cosmetic field, in the pharmaceutical field, in medical devices now, and other market segments. Every year, Episkin is supplying more than 100,000 models with an unmatched quality. 3 models, as we have been able to see on the slide, have been validated on 6 different ECVAM OECD protocols in the context of the European Cosmetic Directive with the animal testing ban, and are now with this move on the medical device field, and this is the purpose of our webinar today. Episkin is fueling the growth of the market with its international presence through the headquarters, which are based in Lyon, France, 2 branches in Brazil, EBB, and in China, SEB, and 3 official and exclusive partners in Korea, Japan, and India. This means that irrespective of your locations, you can benefit from the Episkin model. In addition to his 100% dedication to 3D model manufacturing and supplying, Episkin is supporting the use of the model via its unique service to customer, either directly or via the Episkin Academy. Episkin has contributed to train and educate several hundreds of toxicologists, safety assessors, scientists, and students worldwide. So this is it for the very brief introduction of Episkin. And now, allow me to welcome you to this deep dive in the Episkin state-of-the-art production process. Obviously, no highly sensitive information nor recipe will be shared and disclosed, but a real tour in the reality of the production process of the Episkin models. Not as well a self-appraisal, but a way to show you, to better you understand how committed we are and what are the efforts which are necessary to monitor and reach the highest quality for your satisfaction and your efficiency. Anne-Sophie, it is up to you right now. I'll leave you the hand.
Hello everybody, my name is Anne-Sophie Rigaudot. I'm responsible for the production department of Episkin. Today, I will present you the different steps for producing reconstructed human tissue models, and especially for RHE models involved in the new ISO norm for skin irritation. First, let me show you the laboratory where the RHE tissues are produced. Welcome to the Episkin clean room. We produce the RHE model in our clean rooms in Lyon. We have in Lyon 11 ISO 6 level clean rooms for the production of the Episkin models. We work with specific and very strict dressing conditions and process to bring in consumables and reagents in these laboratories. We have an integrated laundry to wash and sterilize equipment, which communicates directly with our clean rooms. We respect scrupulously our internal procedures to respect the safety of our employees and ensure a good quality of our production. RHE model is produced in a specific room with all validated and dedicated equipment. We have dedicated hoods for each steps and specific incubators for all different batches. The capacity of our production is huge and flexible since we can produce every week up to 5,000 RHE inserts. We have transferred and validated the production of the RHE model strictly for following the same condition in China with Shanghai Episkin Biotech and in Brazil with Episkin Brazil. Now we have 2 additional dedicated teams who produce this model with the same protocol and process. It allows us to deliver worldwide this model with the same quality on the 3 continents. We produce this model in our clean room in Lyon. RHE model is produced in a specific room with all validated equipment. This clean room is a controlled environment with a specific procedure in order to guarantee the safety and the quality of our production. The first step to produce this model is the production of primary cells. First, we extract the primary cells from breast surgery for skin surgery. We have all documents to certify that the sample is healthy and we respect the very strict French bioethical laws. We extract the cells of interest like keratinocyte for RHE or melanocyte 2 to produce a pigmented model. We grow these cells to amplify them and to generate big banks. These cell banks are preserved in liquid nitrogen. Each type of cells are cultivated with specific media and specific components to ensure their good development. We have big tanks to store these cells at good temperature and of course have set a bank of cells banking outside of the company for ensure no discontinuation of the production no matter what. Several tests are carried out of these cell banks, microbiological testing, technical and functional tests to validate the integration of these cell banks in our production process. Obviously, we never ship to customers the first set of this production. To produce this model, the process consists of 2 key stages. First, we need a 2D stage to amplify the cells. Every week, the cells are thawed and cultivated in 2-dimensional culture during 7 days. We use specific type of 2D system and specific defined media. After these steps, we detach the cells from the culture support and we seed these cells in a 3D system. To produce RHE model, we use a support with a polycarbonate membrane. For these 3D steps, the cells are seeded on support like this with specific defined 3D media and the cells can initiate the differentiation process. For RHE models, we need 17 days to obtain a final and mature reconstruction with all the viable layers and corneal layer. We can propose early stages like day 10, day 12 if the client needs to work with a less mature epidermis, along with different size of support to order to respond to different application or demand. 0.5 cm square like this, 4 cm square, or HTS format 24 and or 96 wells. Episkin also proposes a pigmented model like RHE with the incorporation of melanocyte, which provides the pigmentation of the skin. We propose 3 phototypes, 2, 4, and 6, like different pigmentation tone. For each production batch, we have a traceability for all steps, a batch record in order to guarantee a conformity and a follow-up of our production. RHE model is validated for the irritation and corrosion test. These models are validated by ECVAM since 2007. Every week, the production team produces different batches of RHE production for all worldwide customers. To ensure the quality of our tissue and allow them a seamless delivery process at the customer location, we prepare a nutriment solution of agarose which permits to send tissue at room temperature. Episkin produce reproducibility models with a good performance and quality. Each production batch passed our quality control to be sure each model responds each week with the good performance. We have a dedicated team in Episkin to ensure these quality controls. For each batch of production, the production is sampled to have a good representation of the batch. We practice quality control tests to release every batch on the very batch received by the customers. We practice histology for the morphology aspect of each tissue. We evaluate the functional barrier with different methods, and we evaluate the viability. The quality control team validates all the components that constitute in the production process, biological and consumable components. The quality control team issues a conformity certificate for raw material and for the finished product if all the controls are conform. Most of the crucial part of our work is unseen since it is preliminary to the production process. Validation of the key ingredients, selection of the bank cells, pre-production to validate the selected lots, and more are the most time-consuming steps that can ensure us to provide you with unmatched tissue model quality. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie, for these very nice and very instructive insights of the production of the Episkin model. And sorry for the little IT problem that we have experienced. It's now all solved, so we hope to go ahead with that. So the presentation of Anne-Sophie was a real good way to show all our attendees the what is behind the scene, which is actually the most important part of the work, even if it's, as Anne-Sophie just mentioned it, unseen. Allow me now to welcome back Dr. Christian Pelvoisin for the introduction of the new ISO standard 10993/1023, a real game-changing event in the field of testing of medical devices and a real breakthrough for the alternative method to animal testing, since the medical device industry is the very first market adopting a 3D model based alternative assay outside of the original scope of the cosmetic. Christian, it's up to you.
So thanks to Anne-Sophie Rigaudot, you know perfectly now what is a reconstructed human epidermis and how we produce it. It's my pleasure now to introduce the new ISO 10993/23, which is a shift from in vivo to in vitro assay for irritation of medical devices. Before going to the standard, I would like to go back to bases and make a short focus on what is irritation. All start with chemicals and intrinsic properties of this chemical, which can be surfactant, acid, alkali, organic solvent, reactive chemicals such as aldehyde, for example. When this chemical enter in contact with the living cells, and this can be directly by systemic exposure in the situation of medical devices implants, for example, or when it is in contact through barriers such as the skin barrier, the oral barrier, the intestine, or any other mucosous barrier, this chemical interact with the living cells. It can perturbate the cell membrane, denaturation of protein, of lipids, increasing the permeability, leading to cascading of intracellular events with especially production of reactive oxygen species, which lead to the cell lysis, the cell death, and in some cases, the tissue, some tissue damages. These events represent an alert, a warning signal for the body, which trigger a non-specific and ubiquitous in the body mechanism of defense, which aims to eliminate the source of the damage and to repair the tissue to go back to homeostasis. This is the inflammatory response with a cascading of events leading to accumulation of fluids in the damaged tissue with a lot of macrophages, leukocytes, etc. These are the symptoms that we can see, that we can feel of what we call the irritancy, the edema, the erythema, redness of a part, and the pain and heat that we can feel. Basically, historically, in medical devices, to assess the potency of a chemical to induce this event, we do some animal testing and sometimes human HRPT test clinical studies. The point today is to assess and to show you how we can replace this animal testing by in vitro assay, which focus some early events. These are typically what we call the mechanistic toxicology, which is developed more and more for not only for irritancy, but for any toxicological endpoint. The main differences here is that irritancy is a simpler endpoint because it's local, acute, and thanks to one biomarkers, it's possible to predict what happened later and the symptoms. Before going in details of this in vitro method, I would like to go back to Dre's skin irritation assay, which is considered as the gold standard. And my question is it really a gold standard? And for this, I will show you 3 publications quite interesting about this. The first publication is a publication from Caron et al. In 1971. The principle was simple. They selected 12 chemicals that they sent to 25 laboratories to perform the Dre's test in blind study. The analysis of the results lead to the conclusion that first, this test induces a huge variability of the Dre's score. And the second conclusion is especially concerning the mild irritancy, the intermediate category, which is very inconsistent from laboratory to laboratory. Just to illustrate, I made some screenshot of the publication. You can see that for one specific chemical, here it's isopropyl myristate, you have the result of the 25 laboratory, and you can see that for this chemical, the primary irritation score goes from 0 to 5. For the second chemical, idem, you have 0 to 12, etc., etc. And it's exactly the same variability for the 12 chemical. The second data interesting on this essay is coming from a meeting of the IGVAM in 2004. It was a statistical analysis of the result of 164 chemical on Dre's test. And what is interesting, again, is for the intermediate category mild irritant, you can see that up to 5% of this chemical classified in this category can be also classified as non-irritant. And again, for this category, for strong category, up to 10 and 40% of the chemical can be classified as a mild irritant. This shows the difficulty to distinguish between strong irritant and mild irritant, and between non-irritant and mild irritant. And this is why in 2010, during the validation of the Erashi model in vitro method to replace the rabbit, in the report of the OECD, again, they have done also statistical analysis on 45 chemical. And you can see here that for all these chemicals, there is a huge variability of score for redness, for edema. And they conclude also at this, in this study that it's not possible statistically, scientifically speaking, to distinguish from the animal testing a mild irritant from a strong or non-irritant. And that's why the in vitro test is validated only for distinguish between non-irritant and irritant. So these 3 publications show that the famous gold standard of DRES is not so robust and predictive in fact. So as soon as the 90s, several laboratories started to find some alternative to the animal test for not only ethical reasons, but also for scientific reasons. And in 1997, L'Oréal created EpiSkin to produce the reconstructed human epidermis in an industrial way. And they started to validate at EGVAM some methods to replace the animal for irritation. And in 2007, EGVAM validated for the first time an alternative method as a full replacement of the animal, and it was on EpiSkin, the first model, that have been followed by other models in the following year. And from this scientific validation, in 2010, the OECD released the test guideline 439 for skin irritation of chemical, which facilitated the regulatory acceptance. So it's a success story for irritation, for replacement of the DRES test. And what I wanted to assess was the impact in the real life of this validation. So for this, I made an extraction from the ECHEM portal on the dossier of the chemical submitted. And I made this graph, and what we can see is that in 2000, all the submitted dossiers were based on animal data for irritation, the OECD test guideline 404. But from 2010, with in vitro validation of the OECD, we observed a huge shift and a quick shift of the ratio between vivo-vitro data. And in 2019, all the data have been submitted only with in vitro testing. This concerns, since 2010, around 8,000 different dossiers. So it means that we have a huge background, a huge history of data for in vitro, and we can be confident about the robustness of these methods for chemical. This not only for the cosmetic industry, but this concerns any chemical put on the market for from medical devices, chemicals, pesticides, etc., etc. So the question is now, as it is a success story, why we don't use it in medical devices for irritancy? The explanation come from the specific context of the medical devices. When we start to develop a new medical devices, of course, the manufacturer thinks to the materials and the ingredient of the materials, and they select ingredients with no hazard, especially for irritancy. But as soon as you start to produce your medical devices, you have to produce materials, often, which can be a polymer, PVC, silicone, which can be metals, etc. And you have some additive and contaminant which can be added at this step. Some additives such as UV protector, catalyzer, dyes, etc., etc. Then when you have your materials, you have another steps of manufacturing the medical devices, and where you have to maybe to cut, to use some glue, or to drill and to post-process these materials with, again, new potential contaminants such as lubricant, coating, glue, etc. Then when you have your medical devices, you have the packaging, and again, you can have some leachable that contaminate the medical devices. And often for medical devices, you have a sterilization step, and whatever the methods used for sterilization, it can also induce a modification of the composition and induce some degradation of your material. And this is why when you start to do your risk assessment, you assess the biocompatibility of your medical devices. You should work on the final medical devices. And for this, you follow the ISO standard, the 10993 series. And for irritation, you follow the 10993-10 for irritation and sensitization of medical devices. If we have a focus on this standard, on this valid standard, you see that there is a stepwise approach. So you start, as for any endpoint, by the chemical characterization, the part 18, very important now. You have a literature review, you gather all the information, but often you have to go to the experimental part and generate new data in your finished product. And for irritancy, if you have a look, you have a remind of the part 2 for animal welfare. And it's mentioned also that there are some irritation and corrosion in vitro alternative, but for chemicals. And later in the document, it's mentioned that it's validated for chemical, but we don't know if it is adapted for a finished product. The specificity of the OECD protocol for chemical is that we test neat chemical. So we apply a small quantity during a very short time of exposure. And we have after a long time of post-incubation, and the readout is cell viability. In the case of medical devices, the context is quite different because often we work on an extract of the medical devices in two different solvents. And what we will assess is a mixture containing low concentration of potential irritant. So the question is, does this protocol from OECD is adapted? This is what we started to challenge at Episkin. We didn't start from scratch, in fact, because for a long time, some protocol have been developed and published for some finished product. And especially in 2013, the publication from Casas and Coleman for medical devices helped us a lot. And when we consider finished product, what we can observe is that always you increase the volume of the product that you apply, and you increase also the time of exposure up to 24 hours, and you don't have a post-incubation. From this observation, we started to adapt the OECD protocol with Skinetic Arashi Tepiskin by testing different concentration of chemical diluted in polar and non-polar solvent, by assessing the effect of the time of exposure, and we tested also some secondary endpoints to the cell viability, such as histology and cytokine IL-1 alpha. Then we benchmarked the final protocol with different reference material. If we compare the final protocol for medical devices to the OECD protocol, what we can observe is that the main differences is concerning the volume. 16 microliter for OECD, 100 microliter for medical devices. The time of exposure, 42 minutes for chemicals, 24 hours for medical devices, and no post-incubation. At the end, the readout is the same, cell viability, and your medical devices is considered as non-irritant if your mean cell viability is superior to 50% in the two solvents. And if you have only one solvent with less than 50% of cell viability, you have to classify your materials as an irritant. For this protocol, we have some publication in open source. And also, we have a standard operating procedure that we can share with you if you need to implement it in your laboratory. In parallel to the scientific validation and development of the protocol, we started to discuss in 2012 in the context of the ISO. ISO is the international organization in charge of the standardization. For medical devices, it's the Technical Committee 194, in which we can find the Work Group 8 for irritation and sensitization. In 2012, Wim de Jong, the convener of the work group, started to think on the way to integrate these in vitro methods in the standard, and he decided to start a round-robin study. 17 laboratories participate to the round-robin study with 2 Erashi models, kinetic Erashi and Epiderm. A set of 7 reference materials have been produced. The studies have been done in blind with 3 runs, and the statistical analyses have been performed independently in 2007. 3 continents participated: America, Europe, and Asia. And if we have a look to the nature of the labs, we can see that in ISO, it's a place of consensus where we have participation not only of the industry, but also of the regulators and academic. We have some governmental laboratories for this validation, university laboratories, but also industrial, CRO, and manufacturer. All the results of this validation have been published in a special issue of Toxicology of In Vitro in 2018. So I invite you to download this publication. They are all open source, and you can find all the data about the round-robin itself, the development of the protocol, of the reference material, etc., etc. We assessed during the round-robin study 2 parameters, the reproducibility of the method and its predictivity. For reproducibility, we have within reproducibility inside one laboratory. You can see that it's very stable, between 19 and 100%, depending on the solvent. And for the between reproducibility, between the laboratory, again, very good results from 90% up to 100% of reproducibility. For the predictivity, for kinetic Erashi, considering the 2 solvents, the overall classification give us a 100% of predictivity. And for the second model, Epiderm, the predictivity is close also to 100 with 95% of predictivity. So globally, for this in vitro assay, the predictivity and the reproducibility is very, very good for the material tested. So in the work group 8, we decided in 2007 to integrate this in vitro method. And for this, we split the existing Part 10 in 2 standards, one totally new, the 10993-23 for irritation, which have been published 2 weeks ago. So we are really in the actuality. And we kept the Part 10, but we decided to revise this standard to focus only on skin sensitization. The revision is ongoing, and I'm quite confident to have it before summer. For sensibility, for irritation, the Part 23, if we compare to the previous one in the Part 10, we find again the stepwise approach with, as before, the first step of chemical characterization and gathering all the toxicological data that you can find. But when you go to the testing part, this time it's very clear. You have to start by the in vitro alternative test on Erashi method. No question, no doubt about this. You can go to in vivo animal test still, but only if you can't answer to the question after 1, B, and C. So only on some specific situation you can continue to use animal. The principle of the primacy of in vitro toward in vivo is clearly established in this standard. However, I would like to focus a little bit on 1 or 2 points because they have been discussed a lot. The first one is about topical versus intracutaneous. You know that depending of the utilization of medical devices, and especially the nature of the contact with the body and the duration of the contact, you will perform for irritation either a topical application or an intracutaneous. If we compare to the in vitro irritation on skinetic hierarchy, you have to keep in mind one thing, very important, is that the 3D models have a very, very low permeation barrier with a penetration 5 to 50-fold higher for the chemical compared to human skin. It means that when you apply a chemical or a product to the top of a 3D model, after more or less time, you can be confident on the penetration of the chemical. And in this situation, you will be equivalent to intracutaneous assay. To validate this point, the publication from Elena Kandarova and Wim de Jong show the result of a study where they compared the data from topical application in the rabbit and intracutaneous with different concentration of irritant in polar and non-polar solvent. And you can see clearly that the intracutaneous is more sensitive than the patch test because nearly all the concentration give a positive results. And when you compare the results with in vitro assay in RHI, it's very clear that the in vitro is as sensible, as predictive than the intracutaneous assay. The other argument in favor of the replacement of the topical and intracutaneous assay by the in vitro assay is the result of the study conducted in China by Dr. Liu from the NMPA regulatory agency. He participated to the Round-Robin study with the skinetic hierarchy model, and he tested the 7 reference material in vitro, and in parallel, he performed some in vivo assay. And you can see the total and full correlation between in vitro results and in vivo results. And this is why we integrated in the standard the replacement and the applicability of the in vitro assay in replacement of the topical and also the intracutaneous assay. The other point I would like to discuss and present to you concern the special irritation test. You know that in the part 10 in Annex B, you have some special irritation tests for medical devices in contact with some mucosal membranes such as corneal, oral, vaginal, rectal, etc. And for this, you have some specific tests. In the standard, we doesn't integrated the replacement of this method by the reconstructed human epidermis, and we recommended to assess the efficacy and the applicability of the 3D model of this membrane. So ongoing work is done for this, especially for vaginal irritation in the US with IIVS, which submitted MDDT dossier to the US FDA. For corneal replacement, there are also some studies in South Korea with Yonsei University with Dr. Kwon, and I think that Dr. Kandarova is also working from some such replacement method. The last point I want to underline is the question of extractable versus non-extractable medical devices. The Roon-Robin study has been done with some solid materials, some polymer, and that have been extracted, and that's why it's clearly adapted to the use of 3D models in the standard. Concerning non-extractable, it's written in the standard that the in vitro method could be used, but you need, in this situation, to provide some scientific rationale to use this 3D model. It means that it's not fully adapted, but you have to explain why you adapt this method for non-extractable medical devices, such as gel, liquid, cream, and powder. So there is still some job to do on this, and we continue to work on this at Episkin in order to have a full acceptance as soon as possible of this method for the non-extractable. And for this, you have existing data, as I presented in my in the beginning of my presentation, coming from pharma industry for dermatological finished product, from cosmetic, which can support the use of 3D models for these non-extractable medical devices. It's time to finish for me. So to conclude, I would like to give you some take-home message. In 2020, last year, the situation was when you had a biocompatibility to perform for medical devices, you start by following the part 1 and the part 2 for animal welfare, and all start with chemical characterization with part 18. But when you arrive to testing of irritation for extractable, you have two situations. One is for medical devices for external contact with healthy skin. In this case, after extraction, you go to topical application on the rabbit. If it is a systemic exposure, in this case, extraction and intracutaneous essay. For non-extractable, again, two situations, external contact or systemic, topical or intracutaneous, and third situation for special irritation test. This was the reality before today. In 2021, the situation is totally different. If you have something to keep in mind, it's only this slide. When you have an extractable medical devices, whatever the type, external, internal contact, you go directly to in vitro assay on reconstructed human epidermis. No question about this. In the situation of non-extractable, this will be a case-by-case situation where you can use the in vitro method if you have some supporting data, and we can help you to support this if you need. And we are working also to publish this year, I hope, some supporting data about this. Third situation, special irritation test. For the moment, there are no validated methods for medical devices, but several projects should be able to deliver and to give data to be able to replace the animal soon. Thank you very much for your attention. Merci de votre attention. It's finished for me. And now I'm very pleased to leave the floor for Christelle Vidot, who will give you a live demonstration of a protocol. Rendezvous for the question and answer session. Thanks a lot.
Hello everyone. I'm going to show you how it's easy to perform this protocol. First, I'm going to make an overview of what material you will need. So you will need conventional laboratory equipment, a laminar flow hood, a cell incubator, 96 well plate photometer, a plate checker, some forceps, beaker and funnel, a positive displacement pipette for the application, multipette with adapter for 25 and 5 ml distributor, different type of plate, 6 well plate, 24 well plate, and 96 well plate. You will also need some PBS as negative control, SDS as positive control, sesame oil as non-polar vehicle, saline solution as polar vehicle, some MTT 1 milligram per ml, and isopropanol. And of course, our epidermis and maintenance medium. Place to the live demonstration. So upon reception, you will have to transfer the epidermis on fresh maintenance medium. So fill a 6 well plate with 1 ml maintenance medium. So this is our insert. Okay. So eliminate the eventual agarose and transfer the insert in the plate, inclining the epidermis to avoid bubble formation. Like that. I hope you can see it well. Show you another one. Okay. Then you place the plate in incubator during 2 to 24 hours until the day of exposure. Okay, on the day of exposure, you will have to transfer again the epidermis in fresh medium. So fill the well with 1 ml maintenance medium. And the same way, transfer the epidermis. Okay, I'm going to dispense the product with the displacement positive pipette. So 100 microliter of undiluted product on each epidermis. So I'm going to show you the SDS, a product in saline solution, and one in sesame oil. So you dispense the liquid on the top of the epidermis. Gently spread with the tip. Okay. And if it doesn't spread correctly, you can tap the plate like that. Now, the saline solution. So the same way. Okay. And the sesame oil solution. Okay. Then you place the plate in the incubator during 24 hours. After the incubation, it's the rinsing step. So you're going to rinse each epidermis with 25 ml of PBS by step of 1 ml. First, I'm going to fill a 24 well plate with 300 microliter of maintenance medium to place the insert rinsed during the rinsing step. Okay. So, the PBS. So, not too close, not too far. And then you have to dry the surface of the epidermis with the cotton swab. Okay, and you transfer in the maintenance medium until the next step. I'll show you another one. Hope you can see it well. Show you that. Okay. Dry correctly. And then in the maintenance medium. Then I'm going to perform the MTT exposure. So you use 1 milligram per ml MTT. We're going to put 300 microliter of MTT per well. Okay, 22. And then I transfer the epidermis by inclining always to avoid bubbles. And an incubation during 3 hours in the incubator. After the incubation, you obtain colored epidermis. Okay, so the purple epidermis are the alive cells, and the white epidermis are the dead cells. The MTT has colored the alive epidermis in purple. So I'm going to transfer the epidermis in isopropyl for the extraction. So you're going to transfer in 750 microliter of isopropanol. always by inclining the epidermis. Dispense again 750 microliter inside the insert and close the plate with parafilm to avoid evaporation. Perform the incubation during 2 hours away from light on a plate shaker. Okay. So after the incubation, you're going to perform the optical density measurement. So remove the parafilm. Okay. You can see that the coloration has been extracted. So we're going to fill some well with some isopropanol to perform blank. Okay. And then you're going to pierce the epidermis and the polycarbonate membrane, perform a hole inside, homogeneize the extract, and okay. Another one, this one. And then with the optical density with the photometer. The optical density obtained will allow to calculate the variability of each epidermis. So the SOP is available on demand if you need it. And the demonstration is now finished. So place to the question and answer session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie, Christelle, for the very nice insight and live demonstration of the protocol. Congrats for the performance, which was not easy. We have a lot of questions to answer, and surely we will not be able to answer all of them in the time which is remaining for the live meeting. So what I propose you is that for the one which will not be answered today, we will anyway contact you back and give you all the answers we can have. So do not hesitate to drop your email as well in the questions so that we can liaise directly or via the feed. But anyway, we will answer them. Don't worry about that. What I propose you, one of the first questions was the availability of the presentation and what we have done today. Don't worry, we have recorded the session, so it will be somehow, someday, I don't know how, but we will put it available for all of you so that you can have and you can watch it later. Okay, don't worry about that. many questions on different topics. I'm going to first answer very quickly on the availability of the models. Okay, as I have mentioned it in my presentation, we have 3 locations in which we are producing the tissue and 3 exclusive partners. So I mean, unless you're in Amazonia, I would say, you can benefit from the models, irrespective of your location. Okay, so don't worry about that. Just contact us and I will give you either the right contact or prepare with you the delivery of the models. What I propose you now maybe is to answer specific question for the norm and all the questions related to the ISO 10993. So Christian, I leave you now the hands in order to answer the maximum possible question with respect to what we have seen about FDA, genotoxicity, or whatever on medical devices.
Thank you, Alain. Thank you, Alain. So thanks, Christelle, also, because it's a tricky demonstration in live. Yes, we have a lot of questions. It's normal. It's a new standard. It's really a huge change. I will try to answer to some of the questions. I saw one question about genotoxicity. I will go quickly because it's outside the standard. But yes, genotoxicity, 3D models will be also helpful. We know that for medical devices, there are some in vitro assay already, but often we have to go as soon as there is a positive answer to in vivo. With 3D models, maybe in the future it can avoid some of the in vivo assay and can allow also to assess some complex extract or finished product. But it's another part. So there are some ongoing validation for chemical with 3D models, and I'm sure that medical devices will benefit of it. We have another question. I'm not sure that I will have all the answer. It's about the regulatory acceptance of this standard. The part 23 is now released, and the question now obviously is about the acceptance by the regulators. From discussion with some notified body in Europe, we are quite confident about the acceptance quickly of this new standard as soon as it's published. So from now you can start with this. I think that in some historically there are some countries which adopt quickly, such as South America. In Asia, it will case by case from different countries. In China, for example, we are in close contact with NMPA. They started to implement, to work for implementation of part 23 in the national standard, the YY, but it will take time, but it's ongoing. This is very important. It means that in 1 or 2 years in China, you will be able to use this in vitro standard. This is also an important information. In the US, US FDA is part of the Work Group 8, and we have some discussion. And I'm quite positive because they published recently a roadmap from US FDA on the abandon of the animal testing. So they have some specific question about MyHeritage something. So we're in contact. We continue to work on it in order to support quickly this acceptance. In the US, there is chemical man from Medtronic, part of Work Group 8, who is working on what US FDA called the MDDT, the Medical Device Development Tool. It's normally it's a process to accelerate the acceptation of innovative medical devices or protocol. And Kelly submitted a dossier, so this for in vitro testing. So this can help also. But I think that we will have a sort of gray zone as soon as US FDA will not release the guidance document, something like that. Concerning, I will say one word, for example, about also a question on using the cell death as a predictive for irritation. It can be effectively surprising for some people, but this is typically, as I said in my presentation, the predictive, the mechanistic approach, which aims to go back to the origin of a symptom that we observe in animal testing. What happened before and what can be predictive. And for skin irritation, in the context especially of EGVAM and OECD, the validation during the 2000 years, a lot of different endpoints have been tested. The cytokine release, transcriptomic studies, cell death, etc. And experimentally, it has been shown that cell death is a very good predictor of irritation. And again, after thousands of chemicals which have been tested in vitro with this readout, we can consider that cell death is a good predictor. So it's really the result of experiments about this. I will take a last question, and maybe I will give the word after maybe to Anne-Sophie, because there are a lot of questions about production. It was a question about do we need to perform 3 runs to do medical device in vitro irritation? My answer is no. During the Round-Robin study for validation, we have done 3 runs, 3 different runs with 3 different batches, just to assess the variability and the reproducibility. But now it's in the standard, and when you do your test, you just have 1 run to do. Maybe I will stop there to give the word to Anne-Sophie about some question on the production, and if needed, I will be able to answer to other questions. Anne-Sophie.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Alors, the first question, it's about the several donors. Question about the availability of the different donors. So yes, we have several donors validated and available in Episkin. We have a lot of cells bank. We have a big stocks for several years. We generate regularly a new cell bank, and it's possible to produce, to generate different production batches with different donors. The same week, yes, it's possible, but in general, it's possible to generate between 2, 3, or 4 maximum production batches with different donors. Why? Because we produce quality control on each batch, so it's necessary for us to have a minimum of units to generate 1 batch with one cell batches. Maybe I have another question about the pool of the different cell batches. So we have cell batches with 1 single donor or 2 donors. So yes, we generate a pool of keratinocytes. It permits for RHE to have a bigger bank. When we produce this pool of keratinocyte. For the variability, the RHE production process permits to have a good stability, and we practice on all cell batches different quality control. So when we change the cell batch for one production batch, we observe a good stability and not a big variability. So it's not a real problem because we validate each donor, each cell donor. About production, I don't know if I have other question. So I don't know, Christelle, if you have question.
If I can take the lead on that, I have 2 questions. I don't know for which of us it is. I have a question about the proficiency study. Do we need to perform a proficiency study? And there is a question about GLP status as well. Do those studies need to be conducted under GLP? So I don't know if Christelle or Christian can answer this.
For GLP, just one word. After how can I say, it's independent from in vitro. As soon as you do testing for regulators, I think you need to be GLP. So my answer is yes. If you perform this assay for notified body or US FDA, you will need to be GLP. The other question was about what, Alain?
The proficiency list. Do we need to, on the chemicals, on the TG 439, for instance, if you want to adopt and to prove that you are able to perform the assay, you need to perform the proficiency list. So the question is, do we need to do it as well for the medical device ISO standard?
Christelle, do you want to answer or together? We don't hear you, Christelle. Concerning the proficiency list, it's not clearly mentioned in the ISO what you have to do, but if we consider GLP and implementation of a new protocol in a laboratory, I will recommend to do a proficiency list. The best will be to have a specific medical device proficiency list and to have an access to all the reference material which have been used for the Rune-Robin study. The problem is that all this material are not available commercially. I know that there are two or three or four reference material that can be buy on the but for the others it's not easy, and that's why sometimes when somebody asks me, I recommend to perform the OECD proficiency list, just to show that technically in your lab you're able to use the 3D models and to perform this OECD testing, and because the medical devices have no differences to the OECD protocol, except in terms of time of exposure. So as soon as you are able to reproduce exactly the OECD test guideline with the proficiency list, you can prove that you are able to perform this assay.
There's a question about extractable medical devices. It seems that it's not so clear. Can you re-explain, Christian, what you mean by extractable, please?
This is, how can I say, outside the in vitro biological assay. This is typically, it's concerned medical devices. For a long time, and whatever you want to do, chemical analysis or in vivo testing or in vitro for cytotoxicity, you have different situations depending on your medical devices. If your medical devices is a solid, metal implants or some glasses, obviously you can't test it in animal or in HPLC. So you need, before doing the test, to do an extraction in a polar and non-polar solvent. And if it is for biological assay, you have some specific condition of extraction. If it is for chemical analysis, with other condition more drastic, but all is part of the, especially the part 12 of the ISO, of part 18 for chemical analysis. When your medical devices is a cream, a gel, a powder, something or something which is a resorbable, it's not possible to extract in some solvent. So in this specific situation, you perform your assay on the final form without extraction. Again, specifically, it's a gel, a cream, a filler, an injectable, something like this.
There's a question about the washing process, washing step. In this protocol, do you touch tissue with cotton buds directly?
Yes, you touch. Yes, you can touch gently the surface of the epidermis. They are quite resistant, but you have to be careful and to perform it gently. But yes, you have to just little bit to touch to absorb the liquid remaining on the surface.
We had a question also, Christelle, about Y positive displacement pipette.
These pipettes are really useful for viscous product. We have a solvent that is an oil, and it's sometimes very difficult to pipette oil with normal pipette. So a displacement positive will be very, very useful. And also, they don't damage the epidermis if you touch, because the surface of the tip is not sharp.
I saw another question, quite interesting. Maybe we can answer all together, but it's about the endpoint. For medical devices, as for chemical, the endpoint is the cell death. And some people speak ask a question about other endpoints. It's true that for chemical, the validation is only with cell viability. But it's mentioned that cytokine, the interleukin-1, can be useful also. And for medical devices, we assessed the two endpoints, the cell viability, which is in the standard, and it was perfect to predict the irritancy of the materials. But we keep in mind the fact that sometimes IL-1 alpha could be helpful when you have some borderline results, for example, and that's why we recommend in the SOP that we have done to keep the medium of culture at the end of your essay. When you do your cell viability, keep the medium of culture and freeze it in case in the future you need maybe to go deeper in the interpretation. It could be helpful to perform the IL-1 alpha quantification. All these points are discussed in the series of publication in toxicology in vitro that are open source, and you can find a lot of arguments on it.
Christian, maybe your last question, because we are reaching quite the end of the webinar. We've got 4 minutes left. There is a question which has been asked by 4 people. Can we use OECD 439 methods for CREAM medical device samples?
My answer is not, but after it's open to discussion. But all what has been done for in the context of OECD has been done on neat chemicals, all the validation, and we have a huge background of history. Even if sometimes in OECD you have a notion of mixture, but this notion of mixture is more based on some result of catalyzation or complex chemical reaction in which at the end your ingredients, it's a mixture of different chemicals, but it's not a finished product as we can consider in the context of pharma, dermatological products, in the context of medical devices. As soon as you have a complex mixture, you have to go for medical devices to the Part 23 standard. Is it clear? And
well, anyway, we are now 2 minutes down the end of the webinar, so we cannot take any more questions. But be reassured, we will answer to all of them. No worries about that. Allow me to thank all the team which has been involved in the preparation and the webinar itself. Obviously, Christian, Christelle for the live session, and Sophie for the insight of the production. And I'm not going to forget Philippe Gotland and Arnaud Emery, which were monitoring the IT. Sorry for the little bug at the start of the webinar, but we test and learn, as we say, and we will improve next time. So, and of course, thank you very much for all the attendees. We were quite close to 300 people following this this webinar. It's quite nice. Be reassured that we will answer all your questions. If we are a bit late in doing so, do not hesitate to revert to us, and hopefully we will see you soon on another webinar in the coming month. Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon, nice evening, and nice day for all of you. Goodbye, and thank you very much.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.